John Calvin was born on July 10, 1509, in the small but historically significant town of Noyon, France. Known at birth as Jean Calvin, he entered a world deeply rooted in tradition and faith, where the rhythms of daily life were shaped by the towering presence of the local cathedral. His father, Gérard Calvin, served as a notary for the cathedral chapter, a prestigious position that brought the family both respect and influence within the community. This role meant that the Calvins were closely connected to the church's inner workings, and young Calvin grew up surrounded by clergy, officials, and the rituals of ecclesiastical life. From an early age, Calvin was immersed in the world of church law and administration. His father, ambitious for his son, envisioned a future for him within the priesthood, guiding his education and experiences accordingly. The young Calvin absorbed lessons not just in faith, but in the complexities of church governance and legal tradition. Thanks to church benefices secured by his father, Calvin received an exceptional education. He attended the best local schools, where he excelled in Latin, rhetoric, and classical studies, laying the groundwork for his later intellectual achievements. Tragedy struck early when Calvin's mother died, leaving him and his siblings in the care of their strict and determined father. The household was marked by discipline, high expectations, and a relentless drive for advancement, shaping Calvin's character and work ethic. At just 14, Calvin left the familiar streets of Noyon for the bustling intellectual center of Paris. There, he entered a world alive with new ideas, debate, and the first stirrings of the Renaissance and Reformation. The Catholic Church still dominated every aspect of life, from education to politics, but beneath the surface, Europe was on the verge of profound religious upheaval. The seeds of change were quietly taking root. Calvin's upbringing gave him a rare insider's perspective on the Church's strengths and its many weaknesses. He saw firsthand both the grandeur and the flaws of the institution that shaped his early years. This unique foundation would later fuel his passion to reform the very church that had nurtured him, driving him to question, challenge, and ultimately reshape its doctrines and practices. In these formative years, the seeds of change were quietly sown. Calvin's early experiences in Noyon set him on a remarkable path, one that would not only transform his own life, but alter the course of history for generations to come. In the bustling heart of Paris, a young John Calvin began his academic journey, quickly distinguishing himself at the renowned Collège de la Marche. Surrounded by the vibrant intellectual life of the city, Calvin's curiosity and discipline set him apart from his peers. At the Collège de Montaigu, he immersed himself in the rigorous study of Latin, logic, and philosophy, mastering the foundational tools of scholarship. The demanding curriculum and exposure to classical texts honed his mind, preparing him for the challenges ahead. When his father's conflict with church authorities forced a change in direction, Calvin shifted from theology to law, enrolling at the universities of Orléans and Bourges. There he encountered a new world of legal reasoning and debate which would profoundly shape his thinking. His legal training sharpened his analytical skills, teaching him to dissect arguments and interpret complex texts with precision, abilities that would later become invaluable as he turned his attention to scripture and theological debate. The rise of the humanist movement inspired Calvin to go beyond traditional interpretations, urging him to study the Bible in its original Greek and Hebrew. This approach opened new dimensions of understanding and deepened his appreciation for the roots of Christian faith. During this period, Calvin encountered the revolutionary writings of Martin Luther. These bold challenges to Catholic doctrine electrified the academic community, sparking heated debates and inspiring a generation of students to question long-held beliefs. Calvin's intellectual world expanded further as he formed friendships with reformers like Nicholas Cop. Through passionate discussions and secret meetings, he absorbed radical new ideas that would soon transform his outlook on faith and society. He learned to think with the precision of a lawyer, read with the depth of a humanist, and question with the boldness of a reformer. These experiences taught him to challenge authority and seek truth, no matter the cost. This formative period forged Calvin's methodical approach to study and debate, while also deepening his commitment to religious change. He became known for his disciplined work ethic and relentless pursuit of knowledge. No longer just a student, Calvin was emerging as a leader within a dangerous and rapidly growing movement. His ideas and convictions began to attract attention and opposition from both friends and foes. These transformative years in Paris and beyond laid the intellectual and spiritual groundwork for Calvin's future. He would soon become a defining voice of Protestantism, shaping the course of religious history for generations to come. Calvin's conversion to Protestantism was sudden and transformative, as he later described God subduing his heart. This break with Rome around 1533 was not just intellectual, it was a profound spiritual awakening. Calvin now saw his life as belonging wholly to God, fueling his relentless drive for reform. The political climate in France turned hostile after the affair of the placards, forcing Calvin into exile. As a fugitive, he found refuge in Basel, Switzerland, joining a network of reformers. Exile severed his ties to his old life and deepened his resolve. Persecution convinced him that the church needed radical change, and he felt divinely called to lead it. In Basel, Calvin began shaping the ideas that would define his legacy. In Basel, Calvin wrote the first edition of A Clear Systematic Guide to Protestant Belief. He aimed to instruct new believers and defend French Protestants to King Francis I, showing they sought true faith, not rebellion. The distilled core doctrines, God's sovereignty, the authority of Scripture, justification by faith, and a new view of the sacraments. Calvin's legal mind brought order and clarity, making the work stand out among Reformation writings. Over 2 decades, he expanded into a 4-volume masterpiece, shaping Reformed churches across Europe. Its central theme, knowing God and ourselves are inseparable, our understanding of God reveals our own need for grace, that became the intellectual backbone of Calvinism, influencing theology, church life, and society. Calvin's vision was not just doctrinal, but practical, a blueprint for a reformed Christian community. His work provided the structure and inspiration for generations of believers. After publishing his groundbreaking theological work, John Calvin envisioned a quiet, scholarly life devoted to study and writing, far from the turbulence of public affairs. Yet, destiny had other plans for him in the city of Geneva. Geneva, having recently embraced Protestantism, was in turmoil, its people divided, its future uncertain, and its need for strong leadership urgent. William Farel, a passionate and persuasive preacher, recognized Calvin's talents and implored him to stay and help guide the fledgling church. Calvin hesitated, insisting that his calling was to scholarship, not to the pulpit or public leadership. But Farel, undeterred, warned Calvin that refusing God's call would bring down divine judgment upon him, shaking Calvin to his core. Reluctantly, Calvin agreed to stay, thus beginning his unexpected public ministry in Geneva. Together, Calvin and Farel sought to bring order to the city, imposing strict moral discipline and doctrinal clarity on a population unaccustomed to such rigor. Their reforms, however, met fierce resistance from Geneva's city council and many townspeople who resented the new restrictions and authority. Eventually, both reformers were expelled. Calvin spent 3 fruitful years in Strasbourg, pastoring French refugees, marrying Idelette de Bure, and further developing his theological ideas. Meanwhile, Geneva's political climate shifted once again, and the city's leaders realized they needed Calvin's guidance. They pleaded for his return. After much hesitation and soul-searching, Calvin finally agreed, dedicating himself to transforming Geneva into a beacon of Reformed faith and a model city for Protestants across Europe. Under Calvin's determined leadership, Geneva's identity and destiny were forever changed, and his influence spread far beyond its walls. The once reluctant reformer became the architect of a new religious order, shaping the future of Christianity. Geneva would become both his home and his crucible, a place of challenge, transformation, and enduring legacy until the very end of his life. The execution of Michael Servetus in 1553 remains the darkest episode of Calvin's career. Servetus, a radical theologian, challenged core Christian doctrines and antagonized Calvin for years. After fleeing Catholic persecution, Servetus was arrested in Geneva and tried for heresy. Calvin played a key role as theological prosecutor, though the city council conducted the trial. Despite Calvin's plea for a less brutal execution, Servetus was burned at the stake. The event, accepted by most leaders of the time, later stained Calvin's reputation as a champion of conscience. The Servetus affair reveals the limits of tolerance in an age obsessed with religious unity. Calvin's final years in Geneva saw the consolidation of his reforms and the founding of the Genevan Academy in 1559. The academy trained pastors and missionaries, spreading Calvinist ideas across Europe. Students from France, Scotland, England, and beyond flocked to Geneva, carrying Calvin's teachings home. John Knox called Geneva the most perfect school of Christ since the Apostles. Calvin's influence extended to church government, education, and social welfare. He established a model for Presbyterian governance that would shape Protestantism worldwide. Calvin died in 1564, buried in an unmarked grave as he wished. His writings, especially the became foundational texts for generations. Calvinism profoundly shaped Western Christianity and history. Though complex and severe, Calvin's impact as a thinker and reformer endures.